is what happens when women don't have structures. I lead a company called Safi Media. We're on a mission to double the number of women-founded companies who scale past 1 million by 2030. Some of my fundamental beliefs and our fundamental beliefs at Safi are that structure creates freedom. And I think, for me, as entrepreneurship has become an increasingly viable option and an increasingly desirable option, so I think there's tremendous power to reshape through the lens of our businesses and worldviews how the workforce works, how business is done, how success is measured. And for us, it's really about ensuring that women-led businesses have the infrastructure that they need in order to scale. Is what happens when women don't have structures, they become the structure.
Welcome to Builders, the podcast for impact-driven leaders who are done carrying it all and ready to scale with clarity, strategy, and freedom. I'm your host, Alex Snider, strategic growth architect, creator of the CEO Recode, and second brain to leaders who are building brilliant companies without sacrificing every ounce of their time, energy, or sanity. Each episode, I sit down with bold leaders who've rebuilt, recalibrated, or redefined what it means to lead well and live well on their own terms. We talk messy pivots, leadership upgrades, tactical wins, and the deep personal work it takes to build a business that actually works for you. If you love the episode, make sure you follow, rate, and share it with another leader who's building big and wants to build smarter. And if you're listening and thinking, damn, I need someone in the guts of my business with me, let's talk. Book your free business breakdown call using the link in the show notes. In 30 minutes, I'll help you pinpoint where blockers in your time, team, or strategy are silently stalling your growth and define 2 to 3 high impact shifts you can implement now to regain traction and build momentum. Now, let's dive in. Let's build it better. Welcome, Eleanor, to the Builders Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today.
I'm so pumped to be here with you.
Over the moon. You are so many incredible things. Founder of Safi Media, podcast host, women owned. You are one of my mentors. So the jazz does not even begin to cover how excited I am. I feel like we could possibly outdo the 4-hour podcast that we did earlier this season, but we will not. We will be keeping it tight and focused. But as always, I'm going to not even try to do justice to you. So in your own words, could you share with us, who are you and what are you building?
So yeah, the feeling is mutual. There's so much alignment. I feel like sort of two hardcore business nerds, you know what I mean, who could really chat all day about all the things. I lead a company called Safi Media. We're on a mission to double the number of women-founded companies who scale past 1 million by 2030. Our sort of, some of my fundamental beliefs and our fundamental beliefs at Safi are that structure creates freedom, and it really comes down to that. And I think, for me, as entrepreneurship has become an increasingly viable option and an increasingly desirable option for all kinds of different reasons. And you have more people, more women starting businesses. I mean, this is tremendous. I think there's tremendous power to reshape through the lens of our businesses and worldviews how the workforce works, how business is done, how success is measured. And for us, it's really about ensuring that women-led businesses have the infrastructure that they need in order to scale with calm, with a sense of order, and with kind of the backup. Because what happens when women don't have structure is they become the structure. So all of that sort of over-functioning conditioning can kick in. And a few years in, they're like, why am I doing this? Why did I start this business? This was not what I wanted. That's what we're sort of on a mission to work against. So that's me. I'm a mom of 2 boys. I've been married to my husband, Leon, for over 20 years. And I do my best to keep a lot of key parts of my life boringly predictable so that I can do a ton of creative exploration and really sort of pursue my biggest goals, knowing that I have myself a ton of stability and structure beneath me.
I love that. I'm going to pause us. You keep going in and out of focus, and I don't know why. Is there like a blur option? I never use a background options. I don't know if you selected like a background blur or if it's maybe with the microphone right in front, but something's causing the camera to like come in and out of focus. And I just want the video to be, and we'll edit this out. Don't worry. Sorry, I didn't mention that, but.
No, I'm not seeing anything on mine. There's no blur. It's just through Riverside traditional. I'm not, oh, sorry, I just clicked it off.
Okay. It may be just a quality thing, which will be fine because Riverside uploads on both sides. I just wanted to double check because I was like, ooh, I'm really noticing it and I haven't noticed that before. Okay. We're going to trust that it's just what I see and not what he sees, but I just was like,
I hope that's the case. Yeah.
I hope so. Okay. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Okay. So I'm just going to transition back in and be like, thank you so much. Amazing. Thank you so much. So I always ask people, how did you know that you were meant to build businesses?
I don't think I knew initially. I don't know that I actually think I'm meant to build businesses. It just happens to be what I do. So my vocation really is much more, I enjoy building businesses for sure. Like I enjoy being a builder and creator. My vocation is much more tied to the sort of intersection of women, money, and power. That's something that has been endlessly fascinating to me for a long time. And, really sort of a lot of my work is around making sure that women are operating inside power aware infrastructure. So a lot of my work actually comes down to that. Money is power, but also the structures that we use and are a part of and build for ourselves either, amplify our leverage or they actively work against us. And so I think that that vocation has been around for a long time. I can remember, so I'm the daughter of immigrants. We moved to Canada when I was a kid. My dad he was an economics professor, and my mother, when they first met, she was the main breadwinner. But when they moved across the world from the Fiji Islands to Canada, it was a completely different culture. She had to sort of retrain and retake her education to be a teacher. So she decided, I'm just going to stay at home. The right decision for our family is for me to raise our kids. My husband will work. And that worked out great, except sometimes when she wanted to make strategic financial decisions, like investing in certain things, as an example. And my dad disagreed, who had different risk tolerance. His decisions would generally win out because he was the breadwinner. And I can remember my mom saying to me, money is power, always make your own. And so that was and I still have a very visceral sort of reaction to that. So for me, that's kind of the thread, right? That's the sense of vocation, and how I've done that has sort of shifted, but that's been the thing that sort of, the thread through my work. This idea of feeling like I was meant to build businesses, that actually isn't really a thing for me, but I certainly enjoy it. It's like, to me, it's a business is a unit of constructive value socially and economically. In today's world, people trust small business leaders in particular more than they trust almost anybody else. And so that's really a privilege, and it's something that can create a ton of stability and richness in the world when it's done well.
Love that distinction, and wow, a powerful mission. I'm curious, how that's translated to what you're working on today within Safi and your other businesses. And I guess really just why this business, why now?
I mean, I have always, been in an advisory role in some capacity. I started my career in advertising and public relations and then moved into journalism. But, my very first business was a communications advisory business. I worked with organizations helping them improve their lobby so they could change public policy, access funding, all of those, good things. So, a lot of my work and what I understand how to do is to administer advisory, and to me, advisory, the business of advisory, which is an increasingly significant business globally or significant industry globally. It's delivered in all kinds of different ways. But to me, the business of advisory it's not like when you're advising little kids, so when at a certain stage, at young levels, advisory is about teaching new skills. In general, when you're advising seasoned people or operators, it's about providing the lens and structure through which they organize themselves and their own knowledge better. That's right, the key. So I've been in the world of advisory for a long time, and it was, I started my business and this business in the way that many entrepreneurs, so some entrepreneurs start a business because they identify a problem in the market or a gap in the market. That's what Silicon Valley wants us to think that the majority of businesses are based around. That is not what the majority of businesses are based around. The majority of businesses are based around there's an opportunity that aligns with a skill set or an innovation that I have or something I know how to do. So that's really where the business started, and I've really sort of optimized it, from there.
I love that. I so want to talk about your leadership and your leadership journey, but so much of what you've just said, I'm like, let's get into it. If I had sleeves, I'd be rolling them up.
Right? Yeah.
Teaching versus advisory, I have a hang up about being called a coach. So I love how you spoke about advisory and about, being that person with a title to experienced leaders, entrepreneurs, business people. And your journalism, I think, probably comes out in this because you write so eloquently and impactfully about really fundamental topics. And one of the things that you recently have said, which is probably because of my predilection or aversion almost, I should say, to being called a coach is, women entrepreneurs need operating systems, not more coaching.
Yeah.
How did you land there? What does that mean?
So I think coaching is like a tool, coaching is a really useful tool. And there's times when I'm doing it, just like, sometimes I'm writing, or sometimes I'm playing soccer, so it's coaching is a useful tool, especially when you're working with established entrepreneurs. And to me, coaching it's really about sort of two things. It's definitely about, there's a professional technical part of it, which is about inquiry, so using questions to open up a person's access to their own, worldview and knowledge, and to allow them to organize it and arrange it in a way that's actually going to be fundamentally more useful to them in a different way. So that's sort of one inquiry. And the other part is raising the bar and fundamentally holding a higher standard for somebody than they may be holding for themselves. And I just, I just fundamentally believe that people don't realize what's possible, what they're capable of. And that having someone who's really willing to push and challenge you is very important. And so, when I'm engaged in those two types of activities, I think I would say that I'm coaching. But actually, so that's, so I do some coaching. But what I was finding is I was looking out, in the ecosystem of women entrepreneurs. And for a long time, I felt that women entrepreneurs, it's kind of like the way that if you look at Instagram right now, you may be, and this is my algorithm, but you may be tempted to believe that every single woman over the age of 40 is groaning under the symptoms of staggering menopause and perimenopause. It's just a whole new identity, and it's just this whole new thing. And so a lot of times when women get into things, there can be this sort of Barbification of that thing, and by Barbification, and I know that, we just had a great movie which took back Barbie's power. She's been so underestimated, blah, blah, blah. But by that, what I really mean is it can really over-index on the cult of the person and the cult of perfection, and under-index on system and infrastructure. And so what I was finding in the world of women's advisory, was really high indexing on things like mindset, worthiness, confidence, these types of things, and under indexing on things like systems, operating systems, rhythms, standards, scale pathways, actual practical tools that help you think bigger and like turn a vision into an actual functioning business. And so what was happening is I was seeing these established, because without an operating system, the founder is the operating system. And so I was seeing founders, particularly women founders, pivot their entire businesses in these with disproportionate frequency. And I was like, what the hell is going on? Meanwhile, I was like, my business, there's a lot of aspects to it. And I say this with huge amounts of love that are very boring. And I like it that way. Like I want things to be, there's parts of your business that you fundamentally want to have relatively boring, because that shows a level of stability, which is like the lifeblood of creativity, leverage, and scale. And so what I was realizing is that these were sort of classic examples of that ethos and sort of the common approach, which is to overcoach women entrepreneurs, and to sort of overcoach and under infrastructure, under codify. And that was really starting to bother me. And it was bothering me a lot because of a couple things that I would sometimes see. One, which was, increasing disillusionment with quote unquote coaching programs. Mm-hmm. And the coaching really wasn't the problem. It was doing what it was intended to do. But if you actually want to get traction, if you actually want to grow and scale, you need systems. You have to have not just little systems, but a core spine that pulls everything together and actually can create results. And the job of the CEO is to do that, is to figure out what that looks like in your company, to put in a baseline system that then can be run by other people. But this was really what I was seeing, and it was starting to really annoy me. And that's when I realized, what I mean? That's what I was really like, we're doing this anyway, but I think it's important to kind of deepen how we're talking about it so that there can be no mistaking. Rarely are you going to hear from me, your mindset is the problem.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I mean, yeah. Look, there is an element of getting out of your own way. There is an element of, understanding how you see the world and how that might be contradictory to what you're trying to achieve. But, you can confidently go to the spa every day. It's not going to build your business, right?
Yeah.
There's fundamental truths about business. And I love that you said boring, because when you look at yes, potential and excitement and sexiness is what we see on the front page, because that's what sells what's behind the front page.
Yeah. Yeah.
And actually, boring businesses are so valuable. They are the ones that people look for when they're buying. So when you hear the Cody Sanchez and this and that talking about buying up businesses, succession planning, all of these things, I could do a whole podcast on this. So I'm trying not to get carried away, but it is a boring business that is predictable, that is fundamental, that is easy to understand and to replicate, is a cash machine.
It's right? A cash machine. It's a cash machine. And, and without it, a lot of people will stop 6 feet from gold because the core signs that it's time to make things boring, or the moment things start getting boring, they will make the decision, it must be time to pivot and innovate, and it's and so the deepening never happens. The replicatability never happens. They're never able to disperse the risk from their heads only. No wonder they want to pivot. No wonder they want to who wants to have all of the risk, all of the decision making, everything anchored around you. And without boringness and predictability, it always will be. So I think these are like really fundamental conversations that, you look out in the world, and I see a lot of people need to be in their feminine. They need to live their passion. Is this really lighting you up? And I'm like, you know what lights me up? A fuck ton of money in the bank. That lights me up. You know what lights me up? Knowing that that I have my team's back, that we could have a bad quarter and they're okay. That, that lights me up. Knowing that we have the firepower to, as we start to grow, that we can build the team, that we can invest in the training for them, that, that we have what we need to grow with Calm. That is my passion. That lights me up,
No, I love that you said that, because you just brought me back. She brought me back to my core trauma. No. One of the reasons I think it took me so long to really desire to be not just an entrepreneur, but a business owner, was the responsibility of being responsible, the responsibility for other people's livelihood, right? And so I have kept my team, going and paid through times where the business almost shut down for various reasons. That is fundamental to me, right? And that requires, one, can the business keep going through a period where you maybe do have to remove yourself? And two, do you have, your working capital runway, etc., right? And I mean, it's kind of the same reason I have kids, like that for a long time until I kind of dealt with my stuff, which is where coaching can be really helpful.
Yeah.
Is a huge responsibility. And so I love when you say that, because the reality is, I'm driven by impact, but that's impact on my team, that's impact on my clients, that's impact on the world. But if I can't have predictability, if I can't have foundational elements that you're talking about, my leverage to do those bigger pieces of impact is fundamentally grounded. It's constrained.
Yeah. And it's like, I think about books that I think entrepreneurs should read. And I think a really useful one is The Art of War. And it's this idea that, and if you think about it, and people might be like, wow, that's like totally, where the hell is she going? We need more peace in the world, not more. And I'm like, just stay with me. But it's this idea that, you can't expand beyond what you can supply. And so without that structure, and you use the word runway, like, is there a sexier word than that? Runway? Like, having whatever, like multiple months of operating expenses so that you can make adjustments and pivot and the cash is there. Like, that means that as a leader, you've done your job, which is make strategic decisions for the growth of the business that aren't these irresponsible free-for-all bets, but that are actually doable. They're in line with what you have, like you're doing the work of resourcing the company properly. And these are like operator decisions. And it's interesting because we use the word entrepreneur, but probably the word that I like more is operator. Because to me, that really denotes that somebody cares about how the business is structured, about how the business does its work, and they really understand that their job is to, until you can afford to hire somebody who can do it for you, your job is to figure out the first draft of how that business is run properly. And I think there's so much joy and intrigue in that. It's fun to figure out. It's a useful puzzle. And unlike a puzzle that you do on your dining room table, this is a puzzle that generates more than just peace, for an afternoon. It creates real value in the world. And, and we need leaders to do that. So yeah, I agree with you so much. We know this. I mean,
yeah,
we know that there's so much.
We're very aligned.
Yeah, exactly.
We're very aligned, but I think it allows us to go really deep, right? Because I'm like, okay, but like, how do we see that? And then like, what's the lever? So that's why I was so excited to have you on.
Yeah.
You touched on something which I love. I love the word operator, right? It's really interesting. Actually, I had a client just come in and was saying, I'm this and this and this, but a couple of partners, like they're operators, clients more in the financial, like
Yeah.
funds and
Yeah.
capital and venture, but their partners are operators, which is great. And they've run businesses and structured them, but they understand that there's a difference. And so I really love that. And when you said operator just now, it made me think about what you were talking about, where people stop 6 feet short of kind of what I would consider operationalizing and
Yeah.
stabilizing the business. Do you think that that is because a lot of your clients are more visionary and they are, there's often entrepreneurs who are really good at getting something off the ground, and then there's the ones who are really good at growing it to the next level, right? And we do talk about visionary integrator or visionary operator, but I'm curious whether you think it's like those are the people who have gotten it off the ground and then they stop short because they're just like on to the next and it's not exciting for them, or
Yeah.
is it just a lack of experience and knowledge of how to do that?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's probably a mix of both. I think it's probably a mix of both. It's interesting, so there is a narrative that you have a visionary founder and then you have a boring integrator. You know what I mean? It's like, it's a little bit, you know what I mean? There's like the visionary founder and then there's the boring integrator. And right. And it's almost, and in that narrative, there are two different roles and two different people. And also in that narrative, they, it's sort of considered beneath a visionary to do operator work. Like you're not living your passion, you're not being true to your vision, you're not being, and so there's this, a story around that. And what I would say, and it's not that I actually disagree, I think in some cases that makes a ton of sense. I think in venture funded models, that makes a ton of sense, where you have where you have externally sourced financial runway to be able to afford to bring in an operator or an integrator to quote unquote run the company. And at that point, the typical problem for the founder or the visionary is how do you actually integrate your first executive? And because you're playing with other people's money versus eating what you kill, there is more room for you to make mistakes. The majority of the companies that we work with and that I interact with are actually the majority of companies on the planet. They're much closer to the majority of companies on the planet where they are they're bootstrapped. They're built from the ground up by the founder. The founder is intimately involved with every aspect of the business, but typically they're the pieces. It's not like the fascia of the business, which is what the operations and predictability is. It's the front-facing parts of the business. It's the front-facing parts of delivery, the front-facing parts of marketing and sales. And so they grow kind of that way, and you can get a pretty far away. But until that sort of operational fascia, of the business where you're really starting to create the predictability, and you don't do that right away. You don't need to. You got to get the sort of those outside pieces done. But, the problem that I see is that when we talk about operations of the business, we're talking about the connective tissue. So it's inside. So here's an example. Let's say that you have a business where you're delivering a service to a client. The service to the client, like what's client facing, that's considered the work. Well, operations is really breaking that down step by step, analyzing what's happening, creating the processes, creating the SOPs, creating the standards of what good service looks like, training. They don't feel rewarding. But until those are there, then that is fundamentally on the founder to make sure it's done well. So I really believe that for the majority of businesses worldwide, that visionary entrepreneur, I actually disagree. I think that visionary entrepreneur needs to get at least a first draft of a system in place that then, somebody can come in to run more effectively, to improve upon. But I've seen a lot of founders really struggle when they're like, can you come into my ecosystem that I built from the ground up that you know nothing about and fix all my problems? And you need to do it in 3 months because that's how much of your salary I have banked. Like, hell, that's just setting everybody up for failure. I find it, I mean, if I'm being completely honest, I find it mentally weak. Yeah.
Oh, wait, you find it mentally weak.
It's so harsh. Sorry, I didn't. You know what? It's like it's the end of the day when I'm recording. But honestly, I'm just like, guys, we need to do better here. You know that's not going to work. You know that's not going to work. You can't set someone up to fail that way.
I think I mean, I talk so much about leadership as in, you can have strategy, but if you can't lead it, like, good luck.
Yeah.
Right. And you can be a great leader, but if you can't think strategically. I love that you said the art of war, strategy, the glue between the vision and the tactical. Right. So everything, again, I'm agreeing everything you said.
Right. I know exactly.
We're on the same page. But I think what is really nuanced and really interesting is I work with people that I would say tend towards visionary, but have enough self-awareness to understand that they are part of the problem.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they don't want to work with me, right? If you don't have self-awareness, I say one thing and you're like,
yep. Yeah, exactly.
That's my superpower. But it's the self-awareness, because what you said, what I would say is I would frame it as you don't get dopamine hits from that work.
Yeah.
Right?
No.
You don't get the dopamine hit, which, like it or not, our society is just getting incrementally, exponentially, actually worse in terms of like how easy dopamine is accessible. And the visionary type work is often very dopaminergic work. We're not going to get too nerdy, but
that's so true. I haven't thought about that, but you're absolutely right.
And so one of my perspectives is understand your superpower, which, to your point of finding, opportunity that aligns to your skills, right? Like I say, it's usually an interesting combo of two skills or a skill and an intrinsic characteristic that makes you uniquely good at something. So mine is like the structure, strategy, experience with the ability to be like, that thing, love my hypervigilance, read people super quickly. Those two things are my superpower. And I'm like, you got to understand your superpower because it's going to impact where you actually ultimately belong in the business. And then you have to understand your cheat codes. And so if you don't get a dopaminergic hit from something that the business needs, how do you achieve that thing? Right? And to your point, just fully outsourcing it and expecting someone to sort out your chaos for you. In most businesses, because I agree, front page, VC, all that stuff isn't majority of entrepreneurs. Really extreme personalities isn't the majority of most entrepreneurs, right? Reasonably well-rounded, personable people are most entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so how do you work around that? So I often will talk about cheat codes, and it's about figuring out like, okay, so how do we approach this thing that you need in a way that will actually get it done so that you can be moving on to the next thing and moving more and more into a role that does resonate with your superpower, whatever that is, and also what you want out of life and out of this business.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate how you kind of dialed in. We're kind of talking about personalities and roles and, a level of discipline. But you also talk a lot about like women specifically. And so I'm wondering, with everything we've just talked about, like what is the constraint? Yes, there's more women than ever starting businesses, but we also know that they get, and I don't even know what the percent is, like X percent of funding when we are talking in a venture or other capital market type situation. They don't tend to scale. You're going to be so much better at the stats on this. Like they don't tend to scale beyond kind of what I would consider not entrepreneurship or business ownership, but like self-employment. That sort of like multi-six figure, it's great, fantastic. I don't want to diminish that accomplishment at all, but what is it that you have seen in the data and your experience that is the main driver of that, and what's most important for women to understand if their ambition is to surpass the average?
I mean, I think that, when women don't scale, it's not because they lack the talent or desire or ambition. I think it's actually much more likely to be because they don't have access or they don't have power aware, operating system. So I'll give you an example. I started my first business at around the same time as a friend of mine did. In fact, like we both he was a guy. We were in our early 20s and we met because we shared, there was an entrepreneur, seasoned entrepreneur who in retrospect was just great at identifying young talent. Like I actually think it was like one of the best, what a phenomenal skill set he had. He just had this way to identify young, great talent. And so he would build up these like freelance teams of solo contractors and independent contractors and just create really great stuff. So me and this guy, he had a graphic design business, I had a communications business, and we both started our companies at about the same time. And we started at the same level. I was working out of my little house. He was working out of his little apartment. We were just kind of doing these things, one contract at a time. And it was great. And we were both very good at what we did. And so we started getting busier and busier and busier. And so both of us go out and we start looking for support. And I went to an organization and I was rooted to learn how to build a better company culture, learn how to be a stronger leader, learn how to build great teams. It was all about learning. And it was all great learning. He was rooted to meet people, to get introductions to people. He was encouraged to ask for capital and get investors to make strategic acquisitions. He was introduced to operators. Now that he had the capital, then he was introduced to seasoned operators who'd scaled the type of business he was looking to scale, and he was encouraged to take the risks to hire them. He took on more risk, but was ultimately rooted to a much more power-aware system of growth. And I was rooted toward becoming better personally myself. And so we both continued running our businesses for like 8 or 10 years, those particular businesses. And at the end, I had a really highly respected practice. I was making great money. He had an agency, if I'm being honest, probably didn't have the same level of prestige or respect that I did, but he sold that agency for a really nice multiple and used that to launch ultimately a really, really successful second business. And I launched a second business, but I did it with savings. I didn't have a multiple. I just quietly shut down the business that I had. And so I think that story is, it's a personal story, but I think it sort of exemplifies what I'm talking about. That a lot of times, it's not that we don't have the skills, capacity, ambition. It's that we're understructured and under-resourced in key ways. And it's an inevitability, and it starts in terms of how we're directed and rooted. Not by rooted as in rooted in the ground, but rooted as in ROUTED. So I think that, that becomes a bit of an issue. And so then you have these businesses, and then you have, people who are telling you it's your mindset. Or people, it has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with self-worth, with mindset. Like, no, that's not actually the problem. It's not that mindset isn't important, but that's fundamentally not understanding the structural realities that underpin money and power and influence in our world.
I love that you said that, because it actually landed really deep as someone who has exited a business, who has, matured it and structured it. And it's one of the first things I ask a lot of my clients is like, where is this going? Because that will determine how we build it.
Yeah.
But people, I think this is probably not limited between genders, but I think that fundamentally understanding what makes a business valuable is something that could be talked about a lot more. and more openly, because you can have, and actually agency is a great example. Agencies are very hard to value, and multiples typically, unless you are, I think like 9 figures and up, it's typically not a very valuable business in the sense of like somebody purchasing it, right? Now there's exceptions to every rule. And I say that as one of the companies I sold was an agency. So like it's doable, but you know, there's a reason for that, and it's because of the structure and how it works. And you know, I know you talk a lot about, like you said, the boringness, the predictability, the structure, the assets of a business are all components of its value, not only the top line revenue, because the top line revenue could come from hunting 20 hours a day, 6 days a week, and nobody wants to buy that. That's
No,
not
ain't nobody want to buy that. Yeah, exactly.
right? Like that is not actually a valuable business to sell. That is just hyper functioning and an extremely good sales person.
Yeah.
And you would argue not good if they haven't like replicated it and farmed it out and all those things. But like as a individual unit, yes.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go back to like, you know, things that light you up, right? Lots of money in the bank, time to be healthy. Like health is wealth, right?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
I know we I don't know if we fully
We
agree, but
share that.
definitely
That's another
align
thing we share.
and
I feel like the
share.
first time I ever talked to you, you were doing like, you were on like the pec deck machine or something like that. I was like, girl, I know. Look at those lats. It was hilarious.
So you know, I talk about wealthy leadership, and a foundational pillar of that is that a successful business that costs you your physical and mental health alongside other things is not actually successful ultimately. And really that's just my way of saying like success on your terms, like what is actually important to you. And so, you know, I think we can agree that generally you need to be fairly reasonably well slept, nourished, and healthy in order to be kind of energized and focused, and also clear and precise and emotionally regulated. How has that evolved for you? Has that always been a pillar? I think we both kind of have athletic backgrounds. I know your kids are also like the equivalent of like D1 athletes, so
They
I know
are.
it's a
Yeah.
big one for you.
Yeah, totally. Oh yeah, major sport person. So yeah, it's been that way forever. And it's like, and I really credit my mom. You know, it's interesting. So much of it's interesting. You know, my mom for most of my career was most of my childhood was a stay-at-home mom. And honestly, she's probably influenced me the most professionally in really fundamental, powerful ways. So there was like the initial story that I told you, but my mom, you know, was incredibly athletic, a very good squash player, and a really amazing weightlifter. So, you know, she was like benching. She corrected me. She was benching more than the 45. So she was benching like 185 well up until she was, you know, in her 60s. Very strong, powerful. So I spent a lot of time as a kid at the gym waiting for her to finish workouts. And I would be bored to tears. And I remember I'd like go to because I couldn't go in the weight room. I'd be in there like, Mom, can you hurry up? And she would just ignore me and complete her workout. The reason that I'm sharing this is because she showed me through her action that health and taking time for yourself to finish your damn workout, you know, and your kid can be bored and they can be begging you to leave and they're fine. And that really showed me how, you know, taking an hour to go work out, like that was the example that I had. And that's how, you know, that's how it manifests for me. And I do know that I have a supportive partner. We support each other. And so some people, they actually don't have, so I'm, you know, I understand that it's different for people, but it has always been a non-negotiable for me, for sure. What I will say, you know, so this is interesting. So I think it's really important, and we don't talk about this enough, for a founder or a builder to have like an overarching philosophy, not just about what's your goal. And we talk a lot about what's your revenue goal, you know, what do you want to see for profitability, blah, blah. But what we don't talk enough about are what are the standards that are non-negotiable in your pursuit of that goal. So I was talking recently to a friend and colleague who she was a senior leader inside a fast scaling company that we would all know. And the company scaled significantly, like did over 10 million in increased revenue growth. So essentially tripled their revenue to over 10 figures or over 8 figures, multiple 8 figures in about 2 years. So that is significant growth for a bootstrapped company, very significant growth. And it basically burned out the entire team en route. So much so that most of them quit. And what's interesting is they all use that as their calling card. You know what I mean? They're all like a little frustrated that it happened. They feel, like, I think there's a cowboy expression, rode hard and put up wet. You know what I mean? Like, that's how they feel, right?
Yeah.
And it's like this cognitive dissonance, because I think they're both proud of what they accomplished and they feel just not, you know what I mean? Just incredibly depleted. So, but they got rapid growth, and that rapid growth and the experience of being a part of that is a very powerful calling card and asset. It will be a career calling card for a long time. There can be a ton of leverage that's created through that for people if you can hack it. But what that shows me is that there was definitely a culture of anything is possible. But what wasn't there was, here are the standards we're going to honor as we scale. And so those standards do become the constraint. And the constraint is what says, hey, do you have time for your kids and to do this and to look after your body and to actually not just do those things, but actually look after your stress levels? You know what I mean? And actually have some time to downshift. So yes, for me, that, and in our company, there's definitely a standard of self-care. We don't slack each other past 5 p.m. and we don't slack on weekends. That's our policy. We just don't, so we don't, and that's a policy we enforce. Like, Slack is not lighting up. So people know when it's 5 p.m., there's no expectation for you to be checking, because there's not going to be anything there. We're not going to be slacking you on weekends. Like, if there were, I can count literally on less than one hand on, and your thumb isn't a finger, the amount of times I have contacted a team member over the weekend. And does that mean that we have slowed growth? Does that mean that your growth is slower, that your growth is, sure, but I'm happy with it. You know what I mean? So to your point, health is a standard. And I also get that some people make the very clear decision, this is going to be less. That's actually not a standard we have. Our standard is let's be unicorns and what the hell is possible. And I don't judge either one, but I definitely know what I stand for.
Yeah. I love what you said. It reminded me of, I saw somebody recounting a story recently about, cross-cultural. A Northern European, kind of Scandinavian country got a US manager and got written up for, not responding to an email after 5 from the manager or something. They went to HR and HR laughed and was like, we'll handle it. But essentially what they said was, I'm contracted to work this amount of time and deliver these things. And so if we need to connect outside of my working hours, it either means I'm inefficient at my work or I'm understaffed.
Yeah.
And I was like, boom.
Yes.
Agree. There are seasons. There are, to your point, standards. You define your culture. I know people who are happy to be in places that have different cultures, but I love what you said. And I love having watched you also lead by example. Again, I could go on for ages, but I really want to be mindful of time. I'd so love to dig into so many more things with you. But before we wrap up, if people want to learn more about you, about Safi Media, about JBA, which is one of the many ways that you work with particularly women-led companies, what's the best way to find you, work with you?
Yeah. So the best way, I think a great starting place is, so I have a podcast called the Woman Owned Podcast. You can go there. And I think that's a good place to kind of get a sense of our philosophies, how we do things, it's detailed, it's highly detailed, and it sort of it shares my thinking, which I think is important. My website is safimedia.co, but also honestly, just reach out, like connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram. I'm on there, and I think it's a great place to get the conversation started. Alex, I so appreciate what I love about, what I so admire about you is that ability to have like detailed conversations about how businesses work, practically what's required, in a way that's deep and nourishing and soulful. It's such a powerful mix, I think, that you bring and perspective that you bring to the world. It's really cool. It's an honor to be a guest on your show.
Thank you. I'm so glad you mentioned your podcast because yes, it is like a masterclass often especially when you have guests. There was one around co-branded partnership strategy leading to 10,000 leads. I shared that to so many people because it was a step-by-step. Cannot recommend women-owned podcast enough. We have rapid fire questions really quickly before we jump off. You can answer in a word, a sentence. You can pass if you've got just nothing popping to mind. Are you ready?
Ready.
All right. What's one decision that changed everything for you as a leader?
The decision to transition my company name from my personal name to Safi Media.
Just did that this year. What does strategy feel like when you're doing it well?
It feels like when the massage therapist starts working on your fascia around your hips or knees.
I just felt that. All right. Is there a book, a podcast, or a person that really cracked something open for you?
Yes. It's a book called Lessons in History. It's written by this, I think they're dead now, Will and Ariel Durand. They were this older couple. They worked as a team. Their daughter was their core researcher. I think they were in their 80s by the time they wrote this book. But they basically produced like books that were like a history of Mesopotamia, a history of the Ottoman Empire. And then they decided, you know what? We're going to just write a very short book that encapsulates what we've learned about humans from tracing in an in-depth way, all these different rises and falls of civilizations. And I think for leaders, it's incredibly useful to give you perspective on behavior, why people do the things that they do, what you can actually change, what you just need to suck up and accept. It's really powerful.
That's amazing. What's something you've said never again to in your business?
I think it's something I've said never again to is participating in and engaging in conversations that fundamentally misdiagnose why women's businesses don't scale as much as we want. So I think it's that culture that is, you're just not good enough at content. You're just not good enough. You're just not confident enough. You just don't have the right mindset. You just don't have an abundant mindset. You just, you just don't have the self-worth. I actually just feel like just no. I just can't, I just won't. So I won't be on guests, I won't be guests on podcasts that emphasize the person over the system, right? That's the key thing, because I'm just like, I know a ton of successful entrepreneurs in all kinds of shapes and forms with all kinds of personality flaws. You know what I mean? Like, right? Who do well. It's not always, yes, we're all going to face, our demons, and we're all going to face our own limitations and have to grasp them and grapple with them. But the systems inside which we operate and that we create for ourselves matter more than most advice recognizes.
Absolutely. Last question. If you had a free weekend, zero obligations, how would you spend it?
So I'd probably go to multiple like sports games. I'm probably going to go to a WNBA game, probably an NFL game, probably an NBA game. I'm going to eat at some fantastic restaurants, and I'm going to have like a really good spa day for sure. Yeah.
Cannot thank you enough for your generosity with your insights and your time. I also can't wait to do it again. Definitely
Right.
to have you back. So thank you so
1,000,000%.
much for joining me on Builders.
Thank you.
That's a wrap for this episode of Builders, where we get real about what it actually takes to grow companies that perform without grinding you into the ground. If today's convo sparks something for you, here's what to do next. Follow the show, drop a 5-star review, and share it with someone else who's building big. Don't let it be lonely at the top. If you're ready for more clarity, more leadership freedom, and less of a duct tape and go growth vibe, let's connect. Book your free business breakdown call using the link in the show notes. In 30 minutes, I'll help you pinpoint where blockers in your time, team, or strategy are silently stalling your growth. Walk away with a personalized fix-it list that gives you the clarity you've been craving on what to shift now to regain traction and build momentum. For more tools, insights, and my no-fluff takes on leadership and scaling strategically, join the Builders Club, also linked in the show notes. You can also head over to leaderswhobuild.com, where you'll find all the links to peep my creds, see client wins, or just confirm that yes, I went to the gym today. Until next time, keep leading boldly, building smart, and living success on your terms.